was asked to speak on a quite famous story in the Puranas. This story is about a hunter and a sage. It was retold about 500 years ago. There was a great transcendental personality. His name was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And at a very young age, only 24 years of age, he became a sannyasi. Sannyasi is a order of monks that take a vow of perpetual celibacy and dedicate their life to moving about speaking about transcendental subject matter for the benefit of others. So he had come to a great holy city called Puri, Jagannath Puri, or Nilachala. And he had encountered a person that was considered one of the great speakers of Vedic or transcendental knowledge. His name was Savrabhoma Bhattacharya. This name means one who has like unlimited knowledge. And he, in this discourse, Savrabhoma was very famous for, he had developed 9 different meanings or explanations of a very famous Vedic verse that is called the Atmarama verse or shloka. The word Atmarama means one who is utterly self-satisfied, not in need of anything. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary to be so at peace and so utterly fulfilled. There is nothing pulling you. There is no anxiety. There is no feeling of emptiness. It is a situation of great spiritual joy. And in the course of this conversation, he asked Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who he had now come to respect, even though he was so much his junior in age. He saw him as a rather innocent young lad. And then when he began discoursing with him, he became like really amazed at the depth and vastness of his knowledge. And so he asked him to speak on this verse, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave 32 unique meanings to this verse. I mean, the Sanskrit language, the word Sanskrit means actually like highly polished. It is a language that is probably unparalleled. The 2 languages that have some similarity in structure, not in word usage but structure, are Latin and Greek. So people of enormous learning could take apart these things and explain them in so many ways. And one of his unique explanations was he gave reference to a hunter. And with that, he began then to narrate a great Puranic, ancient story. In this story, there was a great sage. His name is Narada Muni. He was a renowned transcendentalist that was filled with mystic opulence and full transcendental love for the Supreme. He often traveled around with a musical instrument called a veena and would be engaged in kirtan. And everybody was just astounded every time they met him. He was like extraordinary. So one day he had decided to travel to this city called Prayag. which is at the confluence of three great sacred rivers. It's meant to be a very holy place. And his journey took him through a jungle. And while walking along this jungle path, he encountered a deer. The deer had been shot with an arrow, but it wasn't a mortal wound. And the deer was lying on the ground, and its legs had been broken. And so it was writhing in agony and pain. And he went a little further and encountered a boar in the same condition. And he was utterly distressed to see this unnecessary suffering. A little further, he found a rabbit that was in the same condition. And he was feeling so mortified to see this suffering, unnecessary suffering. Then he saw a man through the forest who was a hunter, and he had a bow and arrow, and he was preparing to shoot some other animals that were in this glade. And he immediately went towards him, went off the path and through the jungle towards him. And the animals heard him and immediately scattered in all directions. And this hunter turned around. His name was Mrigarhi. This is a word that actually refers to the lion, but not in the heroic sense, in the sense of being the enemy of animals, because that's the nature of the lion. It's an animal of prey. And so Mrigarhi saw him and was seething with anger that why had he interrupted him. So as was the tradition in those times, people that had taken vows and lived the life of saintly people, they adopted a certain attire, saffron robes, etc. So he saw him and he instantly recognized that, okay, he's one of these guys. But he was kind of a little bit taken aback at his countenance. He looked so extraordinarily different than an ordinary person. And he asked him, why have you wandered off the path? You know, and he actually wanted to begin cursing him, but he restrained himself because he thought, it's not cool. But he was angry, and he asked, why did you do this? Now you've caused these animals to scatter. And Narada told him, I ventured off the path because I wanted to ask you a question. And he said, okay, what do you want? And he said, are you the one that's responsible for those animals writhing in pain, along the path? And he said, yeah, so what? And Narada said, could I please ask something from you in charity? And he was a little startled, and he goes, sure, I'll give you what would you like? A deer skin, a tiger skin? Because in those days, many of the yogis, when they would sit for long periods in meditation, they would lay down a seat of what's called kusha grass, with the roots pointing towards the east. They cover it with a deer skin and then a cloth and sit on it. And the reason they would do that is because they said poisonous snakes will not cross over a deer skin. Because when they sit for long periods in meditation, the snakes seek out something that's warm, hot, because they're cold-blooded. So he offered, okay, what do you want? Tiger skin, deer skin, no problem. And he said, no, I don't want to ask any skins of you. I want to ask something else. In future, if you are to kill any animals, I beg you, please kill them instantly. Don't leave them suffering in this way. And he was quite surprised. He says, look, I learned this method of hunting from my father. My name is Mrigarhi. I'm the enemy of animals. What's wrong with this? A typical hunter kind of dude. And Narada spoke to him with great gentleness and compassion. He said, while you may be a hunter, your killing of animals is considered a much smaller offense than this thing of leaving them suffering. He said, you incur so much more karmic fruit reaction, and you will have to return lifetime after lifetime. And for each animal that you have killed this way, your life will be terminated in a similar manner. And so for as many animals that you're killing this way, this is the number of lifetimes that you will have to return and experience this. And this completely shocked the guy. He had never thought of this or heard of anything like this before. And while he accepted it, there was a little hesitancy, but he reflected on it. And the way in which Narada spoke with him was with such compassion. He was sort of like deeply touched, and he was thinking, yeah, he's concerned about the animals, but it's obvious he's deeply concerned about me and not wanting me to suffer. And then he really thought about it and became convinced that, okay, this is a reality. So then he bowed down, which was the custom before this saintly person. And he said to him, so since I have already incurred such a karmic load, how do I become free of this? Please, he said, I beseech you. He was so convinced that what he was hearing was true. He said, I beseech you, tell me how to become free of this. And so Narada proposed something. He said, first, break your bow, and then I will tell you. And the guy was startled, because this was his whole life. So in this hesitation, he says, but this is my livelihood. This is how I put food on the table. How will I survive without it? And Narada said something really amazing. He said, do not worry. I will see to it that you are supplied with all the food that you need every day. And the guy, he didn't hesitate. He heard that, he accepted that was true, and instantly broke his bow. Then he asked, now what should I do? So he told him all the money that he had acquired, which was from this livelihood. He said, you must disperse it. You must give it in charity to suitable people, particularly those who are on the spiritual path. And then you should go with your wife and build a small hut down by the river. And daily you must engage in this form of meditation. And he initiated him into the chanting of a mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And he said, do not fear or have any anxiousness. I promise you that you will be fine. So then Magrari, his new disciple, offered deep respects to him, and Narada went on his way. After a considerable amount of time, not too long, had passed, Narada was in the company of another great and famous Muni. His name was Parvat Muni. And they were traveling through the area. And he said, I want you to meet a new disciple of mine, and told him that he was formerly a hunter. So Parvat Muni said, okay, well, let's go. So they went to this village, and they went down by the river, and there was Magrari with his wife sitting in front of a very modest cottage, deeply absorbed in meditation. And he looked up when he saw his guru, his spiritual master, approaching. He became overwhelmed with joy. And jumping up, he ran really quickly towards him to offer his respects. And in these spiritual relationships, they would often prostrate themselves on the ground. But when he arrived at his spiritual master, there were like ants running around all over the ground, and so he hesitated. And it was kind of like the culture to instantly bow, and not bowing instantly was considered like, not cool. But he hesitated, and with a cloth that he had covering the top of his body, he began brushing the ground to get the ants away, because he did not even want to hurt an ant. And when the ground was clear, he offered his deep respects and invited him into his house. So he put out a straw mat and offered water to his spiritual teacher. And then Narada Muni asked how they were, and he said, we are doing well. But I must ask one thing from you, please. And Narada Muni said, sure, what is it? He said, you are providing too much food. Like sometimes it's 5 or 10 times what we need, so we have to reject it. People keep coming and offering food. It was part of the ancient Vedic culture. If somebody came to this point of wanting to be totally immersed in a spiritual lifestyle and voluntarily accepted poverty, and had an attitude of great humility, common people would think, well, I'm doing myself a favor if I go and spend a bit of time with this person and become influenced by them. And if I'm going to do that and my life has been touched by them, I should bring some gift. It is a manifestation of gratitude. So, and it makes me more pious, and it helps me in my life. So people would do this, and when they saw this transformation of this guy that was a pretty grotesque, he's described as a really grotesque character, he was really violent and stuff, to now this really sweet guy who was so kind and compassionate and happy and self-satisfied. It was just like, it blew people's mind, and their lives were touched and transformed. So when they came as a sign of gratitude, and so that they may incur some pious blessings, they would come and bring offerings. And Narada Muni knew what would happen. And he knew if that guy took this course in his life, this is what would happen with him. And that's why he could boldly say, I will arrange that food is brought to you every day. But the guy never felt out of his humility that it was happening because of him. He thought Narada Muni had influenced the people in the village to come and, supply him with food. So he's asking him, please, a little bit less. It's a bit more than we need. So Parvat Muni was looking at Narada Muni and just chuckling. He thought that was rather humorous. He said, let us chant. So they began a kirtan. And as the kirtan started, this person, Mrigadhi, became lost in a deep transcendental ecstasy, this samadhi. And as he chanted, his body began to manifest a joy that is so wonderful. And he began even shedding tears as his heart melted as he chanted these transcendental sounds. And Parvat Muni looked at Narada and he said, indeed, you are a touchstone. So there's a word, Chintamani. Chintamani meant like a touchstone. It was a special stone that was imbued with qualities that when touched to metal like iron could transform it to gold. So the implication was, you've had such an influence on this person. You've transformed him like from rusty iron into gold. So this wonderful, story that was spoken by the great Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it pointed to two really important principles. For our life to become completely transformed, for us to become transcendentalists, for us to experience complete fulfillment and happiness, and to have all spiritual realization, the two things that one needs, one is the association of a great saintly personality, to hear from them spiritual instruction. The other thing is to receive this spiritual sound, these transcendental vibrations, these sacred mantras, and to invite them into the depth of our heart, and there to take refuge, to let go of everything, to give up all material consciousness and ideas and values, and to just completely immerse oneself in this spiritual sound. And in this way, one's heart becomes absolutely transformed. One can attain the highest spiritual experience and realization. One can perfect the human life. This human life is a rare thing. It is not common. And it is for one purpose alone. Human life is for the purpose of the spiritual, transcendental liberation of the entrapped living being within. In lower species of life, this is not possible. If we utilize this human form of life for this purpose, then one is said to have achieved the actual purpose of life. Okay? End of story. Cool or what? The Vedic literature is filled with these, it's just limitless stories that have tremendous importance and things to learn. And it's not just because it's so ancient, it doesn't apply now in the time that we live. It's like, give me a break. What's so great about this time? We've all become idiots. Sorry, can I say that? We've become overwhelmed with all this technology and lost any real sense of who we truly are and what is the true and valuable purpose of life. There is an epidemic of unhappiness. The rates of suicide, these are all symptoms of the way in which we are choosing to live. The problem is we're not making clear and conscious choices. We don't even understand to what degree our desires and wants have been placed in our head. They're not truly originating from us. So while in this time, the increase of technology should never be equated with an increase of wisdom. Wisdom is something different. If a person is inherently self-centered, greedy, therefore dangerous, and you give them technology, all it does is amplify what's already inside of you. Technology doesn't solve your problems. And so there is a necessity to develop a very clear idea of what is the path forward for me. What should be my path forward? What is in my best interest? That is what the spiritual process is all about. Okay, anybody have a question? We good? Let's chant. So we'll chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Hari Om.
Ah
Haribol.